just a word of warning. Joel's helping with kids' church this morning. So he did tell me that they were going to get the cajon out and do some worship and get the kids involved. So if it's noisy out there, praise the Lord. Exactly right. Okay, so last week we got into our series on prayer, and prayer I guess is deeper than just downloading some requests that way, or having somebody stand up here and say some nice words. It's a practice and probably a reflection of a relationship with God. That is at its core what Jesus was trying to show the disciples last week about. You approach God as Father. Father. It's a remarkable concept. I want to suggest that that's not the end of the story. A relationship's good, but that's not the end of the story. I want to suggest today that prayer is a practice, but it's also a step into the presence of God. Because you can have a relationship, but not be present, can't you? You can have a long distance relationship. Now I'm not going to have a go at my kids this morning, although they are here. But as they get older, you know what happens to your kids? They sort of spend more time away from you, right? Our kids sort of they sort of like retreat to their rooms. They do homework. They talk to their friends. They organise stuff with other people and everything else. They sort of go and get jobs and other sort of things. Try to figure out what they're going to do with life, and your relationship with them changes. And sometimes it can be reduced to this whole sort of like they'll just stand at the other end of the hallway and yell at you. And that's okay. I do the same thing back sometimes too. But now look, every image breaks down because let's face it, parents aren't God, all right? But they tend to sort of come out of their room just long enough to make a cuppa, get some food, say hi, go back, and a relationship exists, but it needs actual presence and time for it to be anything deeper than just something superficial. I think the same thing is true of God. Okay, that a critical part of prayer is actually taking the time to intentionally get into God's presence so you can hear His voice, so you can talk to Him. Those moments in God's presence are so important. Who was the most famous person that you ever had the luxury of shaking hands with and looking face to face? In 2003, I was in the police force, and we were working one night. There was all these VIPs floating into Brisbane Airport for the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting. It was up at Coolum, and they had Bill Clinton and a whole bunch of other important people. All these people flying in from all over the place. The Queen was there. I remember meeting. We were at the gate one night when the place was almost empty, and the British Prime Minister flew in. His name at the time was Tony Blair. It's a long time ago, and I just remember this really he was actually very, very genuine, very, very nice. Insisted on getting off the plane, shaking hands with all the people who were there to guard him, and just But the really interesting thing about Tony Blair, every copper that was there was about 6 foot taller or higher, and probably hulking, good-looking men like us. Now, the problem with Tony Blair is he's about 5 foot nothing. There is nothing. I'm not having a go at anyone short. Okay, but Tony Blair is the shortest person you've ever met. Almost. Okay, there is nothing of this guy, but he carries a presence of him that is really remarkable. And he stopped long enough to shake your hand and look you in the eye and say thank you. In 2004, I was introduced to a Brisbane Broncos player named Petro Civoniceva. yes, for the Victorians here, there is another game of football. That's another story. But he was also incredibly humble, very, very gentle, very, very genuine guy. He was also about a foot taller than me, and about, well, let's just say that he's built like a brick outhouse. Let's just say that, right? And I remember shaking his hand, and when he shook my hand, it became very, very clear that he could snap me like a twig if he wanted to. And I watched him play football that night, and I was horrified at the fact that when he gets the ball and he runs towards the opponent. I'm like, I am not tackling that bloke. All right, but and I think the point is that God longs for us not to just to live close enough to Him, but to be people who would seek His presence, and it would actually have a flow-on effect. Like the presence is not just this supernatural power that floats around in the universe somewhere. It's actually somebody who comes face to face with us on that sort of level. This model of prayer that Jesus gives us to imitate is one where God longs for us to pursue Him. God longs for us to pursue Him. We see this all through the Bible. It starts with in this morning's reading, verse 7. It was Moses' practice to take the tent of meeting and set it up a distance from the camp. And Jesus does something similar again in Luke chapter 5. He says, reports of his power spread even faster. Vast crowds came to hear him preach and be healed of their diseases, but Jesus often withdrew to be in the wilderness to pray. What we're invited into in prayer is not just a relationship, right? It's not just a relationship amidst all of the demands and craziness of our world. And yes, we can have we can still pray during our busy times. Everyone okay with that? We can still pray during the busy times, and I did it a lot over a lot of years, where if you've only got 5 minutes amongst all the madness, that's all you've got, that's okay. Okay? And yes, as His followers, we carry His presence with us wherever we go. That is the reality of our existence. But if we're honest, let's just be honest and say that there are probably too many times for many of us where, like those teenagers, we sort of just tend to lurch things at God from a distance rather than coming closer. And without that depth of relationship and presence that God, I think, is after so incredibly much. I just want to suggest this morning, quite simply, that it is important to take those times of regular time where you step aside and you pursue and you pray and you communicate on a far deeper level than just shouting some things in His general direction. It's almost like, and I know every scenario goes wrong, but you imagine you're going to come and talk to me at the church one day. Awesome, great. Call me, we'll figure it out, right? But if you stay in the car park, we might be able to sort of like shout at a distance across the building, but it doesn't actually accomplish the closeness that God is after. Do you know what I mean? And for Moses and for Joshua, it was a physical place of meeting. For each one of us, it'll probably be something different. For Jesus, it was the wilderness, okay? But it was a step outside of the normal, everyday existence and the demands of my life here and now. And my question to you today would be simply to ask, what is that place of intimate prayer for you? Now, in this place of This time in God's presence is so important, because when you're in His presence, what you realize very, very fast is you can't play with Him. You can't you can't step into God's presence and put on a charade, because there's no point. There is absolutely no point trying somehow to explain to God some things that you want for the wrong reasons. There is absolutely no point trying to convince Him of something that you think you need that you actually don't need. What you realise really, really fast when you take time away to pray and to actually press into God's presence is that you've got to be brutally honest about where your life is at. We don't like that so much, do we? But that's the reality. Okay? God's presence is a place where you've got to be honest about your soul. You've got to be honest about your life. You've got to be honest about it. It requires, I think, a vulnerability, maybe an honesty about how we really are, how messed up our world is, and how much we need Him. Maybe it requires a willingness to actually say the things we get wrong, like trying to push ahead of God. Because you know what? If Moses is anything like me, and I'm convinced that he is, he's probably a bit impatient. I'm pretty sure that Moses is the guy who is just like, get these people to where they've got to go so I can leave them alone and just go home and retire. If I could just get rid of these people, everything would be okay. Like God, come on, let's move it up. Let's make it happen like today. Okay? He's probably really, really impatient for all of this to happen tomorrow. But God has him on a 40-year journey of learning and growing and character development and building him to become what God wants him to become. Truly open, honest, willing to be used of God. That doesn't happen overnight. That comes with a whole bunch of practice and time and everything else. Okay? And this time in God's presence means that stuff doesn't happen faster. Right? Time in God's presence means less work gets done. And it's annoying. It's really annoying. Okay? But the time with God is where you realize that life is not just filling in the hours to make you happy. That the real game of life is actually to walk at his pace and let him do the work in you. Irrespective of how long it takes. And if it takes 40 years, it takes 40 years. That time in his presence is actually meant to change our perspective and shift our model about what our life is actually about. Be aware that as you enter into God's presence in prayer, that distractions are going to be all over the place. And distractions are annoying. Everyone else got that problem as well? Or is it just me? No, I just find the second half of verse 7 fascinating. Everyone who wants to make a request of the Lord would go to the tent. Now look, if Moses wants a place to rest and just sit in God's presence and do nothing, the tent's not for him. All right? And I think in our fever-pitched world, we've actually got to get used to the idea that you've got to keep fighting distractions. That's unfortunately the role we've got. Okay. I decided this week to write this message from a place of the presence of God rather than from a place of busyness, which was a different idea for me. It wasn't one you can just write in an office somewhere. It was one you had to write outside thinking about it. So I went up to this place that I'm told how you pronounce it is Porpunka. Okay. And you can see the river. You can see these snow-tipped mountains that I want to go explore one day. You can get a coffee and everything else. But what happened the minute I sat down to actually sit in the presence of God and try to figure this sermon out, you want to know what happened? That the local council decided it was time to clean the street. So you've got that street sweeping truck that did about 10 laps doing every skerrick of dirt on that street is gone. And if that wasn't enough, then a whole bunch of people descended on there with leaf blowers, and they all had to get their leaves away. And then the next crew were was a guy on a tractor who had to spray every square inch of grass on that grassy area there to kill broadleaf or whatever's going on. And if that wasn't enough, then a full tour group bus of people and kids show up and decided it was time to go find morning tea or find the toilet, one of the two. And I essentially had to go, you know what? I can't sit here with God. I just can't. So I'm out. I had to go find had to go find somewhere else. I wish I could find that snow-tipped mountain and just hide up there for a while. All right. And I think this is the struggle we're going to have in life every day of the week, because the world's got a lot of stuff going on. It's got people to sort out. It's got things going on all over the place. It's got kids to take places. It's got technology that reminds us, keep looking at me. Keep looking at me. Don't turn me off. I'll just keep reminding you about more stuff that you need to know. And like Moses and like Jesus, I think the point is we're just going to have to keep fighting to ensure that daily distractions don't win. That's all I can say. I am sure every prayer meeting, and I'm sure that even when we have a dedicated prayer room, which is going to happen very, very soon, the distractions are just going to keep coming. But yet God invites us into his presence to stop and rest and pray. That is the tension we've somehow got to live in. And all I can feel a need to say simply today is don't let the distractions and the demands take you away from what really matters, which is him and his presence. Those are the things that matter. Very briefly, the last one. Time in God's presence together to pray is important because the presence of God is something you teach the person next to you. I'm fascinated by the second half of verse 11. After Moses would return to the camp and go back to normality, the young man who assisted him, Joshua, would remain behind in the tent. Fascinating. Now, here's the thing. Moses is the leader of the 1 million or 2 million people today, but Joshua would be the one who would take them into the promised land. They didn't know that at the time, but that's what was going to happen. And Joshua has his own journey to undertake. He has to go, he has to do the hard work in the presence of God today to be the man who's going to lead the people tomorrow. He can't just be some guy who is immature and full of himself and hope to be used of God. He can't be that person. He has to be the other person. And he needs, in a sense, Moses to actually teach him what it is to steward the presence of God, to live in the presence of God, to be so used to relying on God that he can be the guy who God can use in the years to come. I think an important part of discipleship to Jesus is where we show others how you live in God's presence in the daily issues of life. It's not a personal pursuit. It's something you teach the person next to you, and you teach the people maybe who are coming after you. So old people, older people, whatever age that is, and I'm not talking to anybody. Show the young people how you practice the presence of God. Show the next generation how they do it. Show the next generation what you've found. Teach them what you've done. Show them what it looks like. I am greatly encouraged to hear this happening in our church. Just talking last weekend to somebody from our prayer meeting who just felt a prompting to invite another couple over for lunch, and so they had a chance to sit with this young couple, just listen, think about needs, create space for God by His Spirit to come and minister and pray and bring those needs before God. Really, really interesting that family, without going into details this morning, have had a whole bunch of battles. This morning they're at hospital, which is another story. But time with God does not bring easy, immediate outcomes to things. But I talked to that couple this week and heard firsthand what a blessing that time last Sunday was. And church, there's no pressure in this. There's no guilt. There's none of that sort of stuff. But there is an opportunity every day where we have breath in our lungs to bless and invite others into the presence of God on a daily basis. It's something you can do to the person next to you. It's something you can do with the person next. I cannot wait to have a dedicated prayer room where we can just commit ourselves to it. Now look, there's the only possible success that this sermon will ever have, other than some nice encouraging words, would be that this is not just a theoretical possibility, but a practiced reality. All right? We're going to stop there in terms of just, I guess, content for Sunday, and just allow God by His presence to, before we sing this morning, just spend some time with Him. Let's not settle for a relationship with God that you sort of, you sort of just hurl some needs into in His general direction. Don't just settle for a shout. Come close. Come close is the invitation that God has for us this morning. So Andrew's going to come lead us in prayer. But let's intentionally create space in our busy schedules to rest in His presence, to let the cares of the world float away, and to let Him come in. Let me just leave you with a challenge. If you've never tried this before, why not make some time this week to stop, rest with Him, and let Him do His thing? Whether it's just an hour. If an hour's all you've got, and you can make an hour with nothing else and turn your phone off and put the kids to bed or whatever else, or if you need help, whatever, just try it and give yourself to Him. And here's my plea: if you decide to spend some time with God this week, however long that is, I want to know about it. I don't want to know it so I can broadcast it. I don't want to know it. I want to know it so I can pray for you. Right? If you don't tell me, tell somebody else. It's okay. Just tell somebody, right? Just give it a shot and try it. Is all I can say. Because I think testimonies of the time spent in His presence are powerful. I've got to tell you, it is a whole heap easier writing a sermon from His presence when He just gives it to you than it ever is trying to do it yourself. And maybe I've got to stop working Wednesdays and do that, but whatever, we'll see. Let me just finish here. The last verse for the day before Ange comes and prays. God's purpose was for the nations to seek after Him, to perhaps feel their way towards Him, not to stay at a distance, but to find Him, though He is not far from any one of us. In him we live and move and exist. He's not a God somewhere a long way away. He's a God here, close to you right now.